The causes and effects of salutary neglect. For those of you who do not know what salutary neglect is, let's define it first. It was a long-term British policy in the 13 colonies that in many ways allowed the colonists to break the laws that dealt with trade. Why didn't Britain enforce their policies? Well, Britain had no easy way to monitor the colonies. There was no effective enforcement agencies at the time. They were about 3,000 miles away from the colonies, which made it even worse. They couldn't send British troops to America, which cost too much money. And finally, they were partially afraid that the colonists would be unpleased with the matter and they would somehow find an ally from the French. Why didn't the colonists speak up? The colonists were happy and joyed that they didn't have Britain bossing them around. They loved this sense of freedom that they were experiencing. They got to self-govern themselves and made their own laws. They were making a great deal of profits from trading with other nations even when they weren't supposed to.
So many of you are probably asking, what about religion? Well, the colonists all felt that they had distanced themselves from their religious faith. The Puritan beliefs had long ago faded from this time. The colonists decided that they needed to get more serious about their religion, which was what caused the Great Awakening. In the Great Awakening, preachers went around and preached about how God was fairly angry at them. They basically told them that if they didn't focus once again on religion, that he would punish them. Many colonists were very emotional and started to lift up their faiths again. While in this new era of religion beliefs, the preachers told the people how they should do what was right rather than do what their ministers told them to do. In these two pictures, we have George Whitefield on the left and Jonathan Edwards on the right. These two preachers are preaching to the colonists about how they need to be more with their religion. They need to focus more. And they're basically telling them if they don't, then God will punish them, as said in the previous slide. You can see in these pictures how the colonists are very in touch with what they're saying. They're very emotional, and that's pretty much what happened and how the Great Awakening started. Okay, a question that many of you guys might have is, was trade affected in any way? And the answer is yes, it was. Before salutary neglect happened, colonies could only trade with proclaimed British territories. While Britain was not in total control over the colonies, this was the time that they took to secretly exchange raw goods with other nations. The 13 colonies profited greatly from this type of smuggling with other countries. This right here is a picture of the triangular trade. This method was designed by the American colonists to get around the British economic restriction that was designed to keep the colonies very dependent upon England. So let's talk about American identity. The colonists were able to develop their American identity through the Great Awakening, which we had talked about in a previous slide. Another great factor that also helped contribute to their identity was politics. The colonists had adopted representative governments that had democratic principles that allow each person to have a voice in the decisions about their country. This differed much from the English form of government. Okay, so the mother country wants their child back. By this, we mean that England wants their child back, the colonies which they once so protected. So, since the colonists were so used to having no one control and monitor them, they were not pleased when Britain wanted to enforce their original policies once more. They thought it was highly unfair that they had no representation in the English Parliament. They thought that if they were being taxed, they should at least have some sort of say in the English government. Since that was not the case and Britain still went on to tax them, The responses from the colonists were not pretty. In fact, they wanted to break away from them. To pay or not to pay the taxes? Since the colonists were firm on not paying taxes, as a result, we have the Boston Tea Party, which was led by Samuel Adams. However, due to the Boston Tea Party, then was followed the acts which was imposed by Britain, which the colonists often referred to intolerable acts, because the Boston Tea Party was a great deal of rebellion to the British. They said, hey, we need to impose laws to stop them from doing this. And then after this, this led to more conflicts and battles between the colonists and the British. Well, that's all, folks. Stay tuned for the aftermath of the conflicts and battles between the British and the colonies.